Okay, thank you, Melissa. Welcome everyone to our session. My name is John Shannon. I'm Vice President for Academic Affairs at Trine University in Northeast Indiana, and my co-presenter.
And I am Kirsten Eberts, and I am the Assistant Vice President and Dean of Academics for Trine Online.
And we're going to be talking about OER course development and how a year ago, prior to the fall 2019 semester, we basically didn't have any OER courses. Today, we're offering 46 and counting. It's a rapid rate of growth in the use of OERs, and we've done that because we've seen great value in it. And what we hope that you take away from this presentation is an understanding of the importance to develop a rationale for the use of OER materials at your institution, to identify the key stakeholders and form an exploratory committee to check on the feasibility of doing so, to advocate for financial incentives that can help to compensate course developers for their use of OERs. And Kirsten?
And to access fundamental OER websites, promote mapping and course alignment, and then to track the effectiveness of open educational resources.
So again, a little over a year ago, we didn't have any OER courses. So where did this idea come from? Well, about 2 years ago, I joined the Indiana Action Team, OER Action Team through MEC. And MEC is the Midwest Higher Education Compact. It encompasses 12 states. Each state has an OER Action Team. And we met about 2 years ago in November of 18 in Chicago, the Chicago area. And there was a conference for all of us to come together and discuss OERs. And I left that conference inspired. I was inspired by the great work that's being done in regards to OER use in our region, across the country, and worldwide. OER use has really become a movement. And I recognized after that conference that I felt it was important that Trine University become a part of that movement, play a role in that movement, and do something to promote OERs on our campus. So in December of that year, I formed a committee. The committee met for the first time in January, and I tried to put people on the committee that would have the biggest deal of impact. And they had buy-in almost immediately. They knew more about OERs, it seemed, than I did. We had a librarian who ended up becoming the chair of the committee and still is, an instructional designer, our LMS expert. We use Moodle, so our Moodle expert on campus was on the committee. I asked the deans of 2 different schools, Trine Online, which is where all of our online courses and programs are offered, and our School of Arts and Sciences, because I thought we'd probably get the biggest bang for our buck in that area where OERs are concerned. And then faculty. And since then, more faculty have been added to the committee, and they've really become champions for us. So in order for this all to work, there were a number of things that had to happen. We had to identify a rationale. We had to build administrative support, build faculty and staff support. We formed a committee. And then leadership check-in. What's meant by that is that was the communication between myself as VPAA and the committee. And there was never an intention to micromanage that committee. In fact, that's the furthest thing from what happened. In fact, they've taken off with this idea and run with it. But I wanted to be kept informed so I could bring information back to our cabinet and to our board of trustees and let them know all the great things that were happening where OERs were concerned on our campus. In fact, the committee created their own mandate, and their mandate was to create excitement about OERs and to provide opportunities and assistance to those interested in using OERs in their courses. So the first thing really that's probably the most important thing is to have a strong rationale for using OERs. And at Trine, it's really twofold. First, it's about saving money for students. We've calculated that with the 46 current courses that utilize OERs, we're saving students up to $200,000 a semester. That's a lot of money that they otherwise would have been paying for textbooks. So saving money was important. And this really struck home for me 2 years ago when I was talking to a colleague whose daughter went off to another university to college. And she said that her daughter called her and said in one of her very first courses, the textbook cost $700. That was 1 out of 5 courses that she was enrolled in. Well, she was living in an apartment with 2 other students. Their rent was $700 a month. So basically, one textbook was the equivalent cost of 3 months rent for her. That's a lot of money. And my view is where we can save students money, we should. And OERs are a great way in which to accomplish that. So that's our first rationale. Secondly, and I think just as importantly, using OERs can revitalize a course and energize faculty, because I think it leads to more efficient and effective teaching and learning. I've had numerous discussions with faculty where we're talking about high impact practices, and we all agree we want to do high impact practices in our classrooms, but they take time. And one of the arguments I've heard is, I would love to do more of that. I want our students to have deep learning, not just surface learning, but deep learning where they'll remember the material for a longer period of time. But it's too time consuming. I have too much material to cover in the textbook. Effectively, what's happened is the course has become the textbook, or the textbooks become the course, or something like that. They're trying to fit their learning outcomes into the textbook. And that book was in all likelihood never written for that course. It was written to be as generic as possible, to be used in as wide a spectrum as possible. So what we really want are materials that can map back to the outcomes of the course. And that's exactly what happens with OERs. The materials are adopted, adapted, or created to map to the learning outcomes. And Kirsten's going to talk more about that shortly. So our second outcome was, or our second rationale really, was to utilize materials that will be more relevant and more meaningful and would directly relate to learning outcomes of the course, so that we're better positioning students to learn that material and succeed. So this all involves a number of steps. Kirsten's going to talk about securing funding on to assessing effectiveness. But before she does that, I just want to mention about securing funding. We already were funding course development at Trine, but I felt it was important after talking with the committee. Actually, the committee thought it was more important. They brought it to my attention that we give extra money for those who develop courses and use OER materials. I mean, again, this is going to save money for students. They'll probably be better courses as a, the idea is they will be better courses as a result. It's win-win. And I discussed that with the president, and he agreed. So we have implemented a way in which we can give a little extra money to develop courses utilizing OERs, and Kirsten's going to talk about that now. Kirsten?
Yeah, so there's a lot of information that I'm going to share from steps 1 to 5, and I'm going to try to do it as quickly as possible. That way we have a time for some questions at the end. So step 1, we identified, Dr. Shannon just mentioned this, is to secure funding. What is the incentive for faculty to use open educational resources? We found that it was really important in our process of going from 0 to 46 courses utilizing open educational resources that we incentivize faculty. And by doing that, what we did is we compensated faculty. So as Dr. Shannon mentioned, our courses, we already pay for developments. We actually pay faculty to develop online courses, specifically $1,000 if the course has never been run before. If the course has been run and needs to be redeveloped, it would be $500. And then they get an additional $500 on top of the either $1,000 for a new development or $500 for a redevelopment. They get an additional $500 if they utilize OER in their course. And we found that has been essential to our success because it gets faculty excited about utilizing open educational resources. And so that was our first step, is to secure that funding. And it was because of Dr. Shannon's support that we were able to do that. Okay, moving on to step 2, training your faculty. Training is going to be vital to your success. We hosted a number of internal training opportunities for our faculty, whether they were in person or through Zoom. And they were all about where to find open educational resources, what are open educational resources. And then also had PalSave come on campus early on and do a workshop with all of our staff and faculty. And that started getting the word out about what open educational resources are, what our initiative was with our committee, and just building a community that was talking about open educational resources. So we had PalSave come on campus. Since then, we've actually had around roughly 8 to 10 faculty who have applied for and received a PalSave grant when developing their open educational resources. So not only can they get $500 from Trine University for utilizing open educational resources in their course, the faculty that apply and are awarded can receive $500 from PalSave to develop a course using open educational resources as well. So that's up to $1,000 that they can be awarded. Staff and faculty, what we meant by this here is that once we had our faculty who had started utilizing open educational resources or became familiar with that process or had experience, our staff and faculty became great resources for faculty who were new to open educational resources. And we utilized them as mentors. And that was really helpful because they could talk about their experience in the development process and in locating and finding open educational resources. And that helped other faculty feel comfortable with utilizing open educational resources in their courses. And then lastly, for those of you who are not librarians, ask your librarians for assistance. Our librarian is a wealth of knowledge on open educational resources, and we learned that right away. One important thing too that she understands is she understands the copyright laws around OER, which was really important for us because we did not know all the copyright laws that come with OER, and that letting faculty know right away that OER is not zero cost for materials. There are zero cost for materials, and then there are OER materials. And so she helps us identify the differences between those two. And we've brought her in and had her actually help with some of those internal trainings that we've conducted. We also created a guide for first-time faculty developers on where to get started. And even though we offer multiple trainings throughout the year and we've continued to have trainings, we still feel like continuous training for our faculty and our staff is needed. It's really important to continue to offer those training opportunities. We've been at this for 2 years and have 46 courses, or a few more than 46 courses now developed using OER materials, but we still feel like we need to continue to train our faculty on where to locate OER, what are OER. So it's important to have continuous training. And currently, just to note, right now, all of the courses that we have developed, the 46, are actually using OER materials that have already been created. So we found in the early stages that there's a wealth of information out there, and we didn't need to recreate the wheel. So eventually we would love to get to the point of encouraging our faculty to create their own OER materials. But in the early stages, to scale this, we found that just getting them comfortable and familiar with locating open educational resources was the best route. Okay, so step 3, we're going to spend a little bit more time on step 3, which is developing courses. So how do we get started with developing courses? The first thing that we did is we sent a survey to all of our faculty to gauge interest. We wanted to see which faculty were excited about open educational resources and which faculty were maybe a little bit more hesitant. And we started by selecting faculty who were interested first. We found that to be really important because then it created that excitement around OER. And we never require a faculty to utilize OER in a course development. We recommend it, we encourage it, and we try to help faculty understand what OER are before they make a decision, but it's not a mandate. And some courses, we found there's not enough materials out there yet to have OER materials, but we're hoping that we'll have a lot more resources in the future. So we started with faculty interest first, but later on, once we started to see faculty momentum growing, we did look at high enrollment courses, and we looked at high cost for textbook courses to have the biggest impact. And we have 2 Z degrees now, and so we also looked at those courses that were part of the Z degree that we wanted to start. So I mentioned that we developed a guide for developing or redeveloping a Trine Online course utilizing open educational resources. And in that guide, what we did is it's a guide to where to get started and how to start developing utilizing open educational resources. And what we found is that we wanted to give faculty a starting point. Some of the faculty who had experience in OER felt comfortable and confident finding and locating open educational resources, but we noticed right away that most faculty didn't know where to get started. And so we provided in that guide a list of resources that are here on this site, and these are all linked that faculty could start with to try to locate open educational resources so that they would not be overwhelmed and they would know where to have a starting point. So that was really important for our faculty, is to have something that they could, a document is what we created, a Word document that they can go to as a reference that kind of gives them a starting point and a guide, and it lists some of the sites where they are going to be able to find open educational resources. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this slide, mapping and alignment. So our academic team works individually with faculty developers one-on-one during the development process. And the first thing that we ask faculty to do is to start by reviewing the course learning outcomes and identifying if those course learning outcomes are measurable. If they're measurable, the next thing faculty should do is determine the weekly titles and assessments that align with the course learning outcomes. So I am actually going to share a document here now that we utilize. This is a template that we've created for all of our Try to Align courses in the process of being developed. So this is what we call course mapping, and every single course has to have mapping as part of the development process. And what we ask faculty to do is to start by identifying the week and title for the week. And you can see as you continue down here, this is each week. We have 8-week courses, online courses. Each week is identified throughout the document. So they start by identifying the week. Then they identify the course learning outcomes that align with that week title. And it could be one course learning outcome, or it could be all of the course learning outcomes. You can see in this example for week 1, it was learning outcome 1 and learning outcome 3. Then what we ask faculty to do is to identify the assessments. And they go through and identify all of the assessments that align then with the weekly learning outcomes. Then they can go and find the learning activities and materials that align with the assessments and align with the weekly learning outcomes. And that makes it easier for faculty. We found that if they fill out the week and title, the learning outcome alignment, and the assessments, it's going to be much easier for them to locate learning activities and materials that are open educational resources that align with those weeks. And as Dr. Sheehan said, that was one of our rationale. That was something that was really important to us. We wanted to make sure that if faculty were going to be utilizing open educational resources, that we made sure that they aligned with each of the week's learning outcomes. And this document is linked to the presentation. You'll have access to it so you can look at it in the future. I'm gonna jump back here. And then once the mapping is completed, then a subject matter expert reviews the mapping for content and approves and reviews it. Once the mapping is reviewed and approved, then the course can be converted into, this is our LMS, this is Moodle, our LMS that we use. And you can see how we've taken this mapping and we've applied it into our Moodle. So this is where you can see, and we've identified the mapping and how it aligns throughout the course and included the various open educational resources. So we encourage faculty to use a variety of instructional materials when locating open educational resources for their course. We encourage faculty to not just find one textbook and call it done, one open educational resource book and call it done. We ask them to look for OER and other materials that align with each week's title and learning outcome. And that could be 2 chapters from one book for week 1, 2 chapters from another book from week 2, 2 articles for week 3, 1 article and a video for week 4, and so on. So we want them to have variety. And we found that the benefit of OER allows them to creatively design their course in a way that is meaningful to student mastery of those learning outcomes. And that was really important to us. Each weekly learning activity, material, and assessment should align with one or more of those learning outcomes. Right, so assessing the effectiveness. Are open educational resources as effective as textbooks? From our stance, they can be even better than textbooks. We have developed a process for assessing the effectiveness of open educational resources. We encourage you to do the same at your institution. One of the ways that we've done that is, as I mentioned previously, once a course is developed using open educational resources, there has to be a mapping document completed, and that links to all of those resources. Those resources are then reviewed by a subject matter expert for content and alignment, and then they're approved, and that helps us ensure effectiveness. Additionally, we have also, if we have questions, we send resources to our librarian to also review those resources. And at Trying before a newly developed course can become a master course. So once the course is developed, the course becomes a master course, and then every section that is taught utilizes the course that's been developed by that faculty developer. But before it can become that master course, it has to go through a thorough course content evaluation, and that does include reviewing those materials. Another thing when thinking about the effectiveness of the open educational resources is to make sure to continue to ask your faculty and your students for their feedback. We found that to be really important, whether it be through surveys that we do throughout the year or just having one-on-one conversations with students and faculty about the textbooks that you were using. Actually, through PalSave, they also send a survey, and there's some great information in that survey that's conducted. But that helps you not only identify future training opportunities with your faculty, but it helps you assess the buy-in. And one thing to mention as well is that we mark our OER courses in our student registration system so that students can easily identify which courses are utilizing open educational resources. And so that's also important, is to make it a simple process for students to identify which courses are utilizing open educational resources so they can know which books or which courses will not have textbooks. Okay, I know I went through a lot of information very quickly, but now I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Shannon for positive OER culture.
Yeah, so what ends up happening when you have enough critical mass of courses that you utilize OERs, it has a positive impact on the whole teaching and learning process. We've gone from 0 to 46 courses in 1 year. And so that's a big accomplishment for us, but our work is far from done. We have a long way to go. We deliver hundreds, as all of us do, hundreds of courses each semester. So we want to continue to expand. And in order to continue to expand, we got to continue to demonstrate the effectiveness of OERs and how they really help students to learn to achieve the outcomes of courses and benefit them. So it's a win-win for everyone involved, and get that enthusiasm to spread among other faculty members. If faculty members have that buy-in and enthusiasm, we're much more likely to have success. So I'm now going to turn it back over to Kirsten to recap the presentation.
Okay, so as we mentioned, step one was to secure funding. Make sure you have some type of incentive to encourage faculty to get excited about implementing open educational resources. It definitely, as a course developer and having implemented open educational resources into courses that I've personally developed, I recognize that it does take more time to implement open educational resources into courses. So it's important to think about that and when you're asking faculty to develop. And so we felt that compensating faculty $500 would help with the excitement building and with the workload that faculty would be doing to implement those. Step two, train faculty. That's going to be vital to your success. And we still feel like we are continuously needing to train faculty on what open educational resources are, where to find them, how to implement them. And so that's really important. Step three, develop courses and have a process for developing those courses. Step four, assess effectiveness. Identify a way that you can assess the effectiveness of the courses that are being developed using open educational resources. And so you can assure that quality courses are being created. And step five, continue to build a positive OER culture.
So Kirsten, we have a couple of questions. We're almost out of time.
Yeah.
One has to do with where they can find links for the documents after. I think that would be a good one to address.
Absolutely. We will be uploading this presentation into our presentation time slot. I think there's an opportunity for us to upload that there. And those documents are linked to Google Drive, so they should be accessible to everybody.
All right, so we have in chat a number of other questions, but we are just about out of time. I want to thank everyone for attending this presentation. and hope you've gained something from it. It's been a great experience for us. So thank you all very much.
Yeah, and I know there are probably a lot of other questions and we're really close on time, but both of our contact information is here and I would be happy to answer any questions that you have if you are looking at building OER courses, or need additional information or documents. My information is right there. You can feel free to contact me anytime.
Again, thank you all. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you both very much. I'll stop the recording there.